Welcome to the Equipping Leaders podcast, Leader Study Series. I'm Natasha, a leader development professional and overall leadership enthusiast.
And I'm Corey, a program manager and an emerging people leader, so a leadership enthusiast.
We are doing a leader study of the TV show Z Nation, deconstructing the leaders, leadership decisions, and team dynamics of the characters on the show to show how leadership is all around us. Even if we're not in a position of leadership, we can still demonstrate it in our actions, responses, and in the opportunities around us. Z Nation aired from 2014 to 2018, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in these episodes.
In this episode, we're talking about Z Nation Episode 2, Fracking Zombies. So let's jump in.
Okay, so now we're talking about Episode 2. So in the first episode, we saw great co-leadership. We saw all these different team members come together in the forming stage of team dynamics. And now they're looking for fuel because they actually need to start this journey to get across the US from New York to California. So what stood out to you from this episode?
I think interestingly enough, so right at like the very beginning, the pre-setup before we're back with the team, we're actually with Citizen Z, who's kind of now fully adopted that moniker, and he's trying to get in touch with Mount Wilson, which is the CDC research facility thing, and he ends up getting through to a Dr. Hastings, who's kind of under duress, and he's hacking into the system, doing all that kind of stuff. They're being overrun by zombies, and she expresses to Citizen Z, hey, we can get out of here, but there's like a back door, but it's electrified. And so Citizen Z is, again, hacking the net and getting in. And what he realizes is their database with all the research that this facility has done towards finding a cure from the zombie virus is on the same like power grid station as that electric fence. So to shut down that electric fence, he would destroy all of their research and data. And he's trying to get through to her and ask her, is it backed up somewhere else? And she's under duress from these zombies coming in and trying to be quiet. And he's forced to make a decision. Is it better to save these people's lives or save the research? And so, again, thinking back when we were talking about in episode 1, sort of that shared goal of everyone of, keep people alive and forget the zombie disease. He's got to make that decision. And so he attempts to do it. Unfortunately, it's all in vain. But I thought that was really interesting because he was, like we had talked about, everyone else had left. I think that plane actually like fell out of the sky. Maybe zombies took over. But he was left to make that decision on his own as a leader, and it was a big decision that was going to affect the planet. So I thought that was like a really interesting sort of we talk about leadership, like sometimes you're forced to make very stressful very decisions that are going to affect a lot of people, and you don't get that time. It was a quick 30-second reaction. You had to make that right call, and did he make the right one? So I think that's one of those little stressors that comes with leadership sometimes.
Agreed. And especially in his position, not being in any sort of formal leadership position or capacity or anything like that. But you bring up such a great point where as leaders, are we creating more leaders who feel like they can make those decisions? Or are we just creating followers who become paralyzed when a decision has to be made? So in that, probably great. Like if we were to just kind of like, zoom out a bit and be like, yeah, he probably had great mentors and people like that who are like, this is how you make a decision, right? Either showing him or, explicitly telling him. But that's just it, is it's like so many people get so scared to make a decision. And as leaders, it is our responsibility to make sure that people know how to make decisions and how to think in that way. And you're right, he had this terrible thing to balance, but the person who could have made the decision was unable to. And so doing nothing is in fact doing something, and you can't do nothing. So he needed to do something. And so he just made a decision and leaned in.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think now as you transition over and you see the actual team, that opens up the crossing that bridge. And I think Garnett says to Warren, "Hey, don't slow down, right? Things are going well." And then they hit like that literal speed bump, which is a zombie that gets like stuck in the wheel well, and they've got to try to pry it out and change the tire and everything. And at that point, those tensions are starting to flare up a little bit. So, like, you're talking about the sort of that storming phase of the team and them trying to keep everyone in check. That you run into those little difficult moments as a leader, and you're stressed as well, and the team is stressed. You're trying to fix things, so it's I thought that was really interesting the way they handled it, because ultimately it was Warren who kind of helped jump in. I think it was with Doc to get that tire off, get it changed, and they find the zombie inside, and she's the one who actually pikes it. And so when things are difficult, I think it's important, as a leader too, that you're not always just like, we'll let the team figure it out, but sometimes you got to jump in there and work with the team and struggle through that, because you're just as, even within the leadership role, you're just as important member of that team, and making sure that you're storming through things with them, and becoming a part of that unit as a whole is important. And I think sometimes people can forget that.
And I think sometimes leaders or people in leadership positions don't understand what great mentorship and guiding is. So they step too far back in whatever interests, right? And like, oh, well, they need to figure this out on their own. Yeah, but if they're struggling and it's tearing things apart, you didn't guide them well enough while you were there. So you have to jump back in and guide them. And sometimes it's just a matter of, when there's hard work to do, just do it with people. Like, they're going to appreciate that more than a leader being like, you'll figure it out. I remember being in the military once, we were just unloading a truck, and the most senior person in our org came over and just helped us unload the truck. It was an easy thing. He could just jump in and do that thing too, but it's like, it cost him nothing, and he really gained a lot. He could have been like, oh no, that's their thing, or I don't want to interfere, or that's their lane, or whatever, right? Whatever things leaders tell themselves, but he took that time. And I think there's something about being with people that is super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can also overstep that sometimes too. Like, as a leader, sometimes you get, it's that fine line of trying to be a part of the team, and then also sometimes slowing the team down. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a goal to get done, I think sometimes attempting to understand, I don't want to use the term commiserate, but to try to understand it and show interest in the team, sometimes you can slow them down to the point where now you're becoming a hindrance to that team, and you're eroding very quickly what takes a long time to build up, which is that trust and belief and buy-in into you as a leader. So I think it's also like, it's a fine line. It's one I definitely still, am working on quite figuring out, what's that level of being like a friendly, wanting to understand contributor, as a member of the team with your own specific role, and then overstepping and then slowing people down. So I especially think in like the technical field of IT or something like that, I think it can happen very quickly, because things are changing so fast that the longer you're away from the code stack or from the keyboard, kind of the further away you get from understanding that mission. So to stay, it's kind of like leaning into the leadership piece, and then that trust in the team of they're staying sharp on those new changes that are coming out. So I think that's a pretty interesting sort of dynamic piece.
Agreed. It's the proximity principle, or the proximal principle, where it's like, I need to be close enough to understand what's valuable and important to everyone. If appropriate, tell me your life story, because I love to hear it. But at the same time, I don't need to understand exactly how to engineer a game. That's not helpful to me, and that's hindering someone else. I want to know why they're passionate about that and what things get in their way. But me trying to really understand how it's done is, like you said, that is going to stop them from, well, I got to teach her how to do this thing, right? Or I have to explain this in a way that she understands, and maybe she doesn't have any previous knowledge about this. So I think you're right. And I think another piece with that too is Citizen Z is essentially their remote team member. And I was thinking about that when you said that at
Yeah.
the very beginning, where it's like, he's over here. He also has that same vision, that same end goal in mind, given the same directives that Hammond was given. And he is still in communication with that team as much as possible. So I really think it's interesting to view Citizen Z as like the remote team member, the remote, not distant, right? But who is still engaged and still can remove obstacles and has this really great role as part of an actual member of the team and not adjacent to or separate from.
That's a genius observation, and I didn't think about it. So especially within my current organization, we don't actually have a lot of remote workers. And in this same episode, so Citizen Z had to make that hard call about better to protect the data or not. And that was obviously something that was going to be emotionally, in that case, lives were on the line, and all this data that was part of that main goal. And it's only a few moments into that later episode, he's attempting to reach out to the team, right? The Warren and everyone like that. And he can't get through, and he kind of has like not a, I won't call it a psychotic break, but he has a moment. He's calling out to everyone, and he repeats that sort of that power statement that he said before, this is Citizen Z, long wave, short wave, that whole thing. He sort of repeats it in like this sort of just giving up, almost crying way. He has no support structure there whatsoever. So, and also from the resource constraint of the radios are difficult to get a hold of there, you could easily, in like, if you put that situation into like your and my's kind of work environment, you could put that as a time constraint, potentially. And it's like, he wants to talk to somebody, like a Warren, or like a Garnett, of like, hey, there was this change. It may or may not have been the right call. It also is going to affect what our end state is. But he doesn't get that luxury. And I think, I don't like manage or work with or lead folks that are working remotely, but yeah, that would be really difficult because you can't do that check-in of even just like body language if someone seems a little out of sorts today, and you can very easily keep piling on. And I never even thought about him as like a remote team member. That's a really good point.
Thank you. Yeah, I just working on a team that is exclusively remote. We're all over. We're not even all in the same country, right? We've got team members in Australia and US and Canada. And so if people are cut off like he was when he was kind of having that anxiety attack, it's like, that's like, as a leader, like that's where you never want someone to get to. So how do you create, and in this situation, not easy for them to create, right? So completely different. We're kind of veering off in a little side tangent here. But as a leader, though, how do I create an environment where people know how and when to get support, and that they can call, right? Or that they can reach out. And if I'm not available, who else is? So again, I view like remote leadership very similar to how I view in-person leadership. Like, what are your resources? How do you get them? Not everybody's available 100% of the time, nor should they be. And so how do you get the things that you need to move forward? And so I just think that, yeah, when he was having that moment, I was thinking, do we prepare remote team members? And I think that's where some leaders struggle, where they're like, well, they could just come talk to me. It's like, but not always, right? So how do you prepare people? We're just so mentally used to being in person that like, that's what we put weight on. So like, I know like Dan Ariely was talking about how someone had asked him, do you, this is going to sound like a little bit off, but just stay with me for a minute. He's a professor, and one of his students had asked him, I don't really care about getting married, but like if somebody did, what is the difference between being married, living with someone, or being partners, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever? And he said, if that person were paralyzed, do you feel that you would have a different obligation to them if you were married, if you live together, or if you were partners? And if you do, that's a weight that you're putting on it, right? Because not everybody's going to put the same thing. And so I really view that in the terms of remote work, where it's like people think, oh, we need to be in person, but that's just the weight that you're putting on it. you really can, the skills of leadership transferable across cultures, transferable across mediums. Like really the basis of leadership is caring about others and wanting them to be successful. And you can do that anywhere.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point.
So again, in this episode, I think Roberta also showed that great co-leadership where they're at the refinery for fuel, and she asks Garnett before they've even started, right? They're all out and they're all just kind of standing around. But she says, so how do you want to do this? Right?
Yeah.
They're all assessing, but again, she's eliminating confusion about who's making the decision and who should be listened to, and also prompting him to step forward and lean into that role.
Yeah, no, that really stuck out to me too, because everyone was sort of staring. I think Murphy made the comment like it's a zombie factory. And so, a little bit of sarcasm there. But what they, everyone's assessing, right, took that time in, and then she made sure that everyone's staying on task. And like you had said, where that leadership and direction was coming from. And it's that outside source too that's leading them to this gas and trying to give them the information. So I think it was also interesting that he and Warren were assessing the validity of that information, right? It was coming from what seemed like a pretty sketchy source. It was all they had to go off of. They know they needed that fuel. So there was a lot of times you could see them kind of that unspoken communication of body language and body contact. And when they started breaking the teams out to sort of assess and try to accomplish that goal of getting the fuel, they were kind of specific about how they paired people up and who they thought would work well together. And that's something I think you see throughout the show, is those little groups of like strengths and weaknesses, and where those are kind of marry in or puzzle piece in really well together. You start to see that more. So yeah, I think it was a really interesting setup for that situation. Again, clear cut task. How are we going to approach it with the resources that we have?
Yes, and don't let people figure it out on their own, because we've never done this before. So again, there's like the piece of leadership where we want people to have autonomy, but then they also like, this is new. Let me you two go together. You two do this, you two do that. How you do it is your thing. But I'm telling you what the end result is that I need from you, and you're a team now. So go do that.
Yeah, no, something in this situation and in others that I always thought was interesting is, like and again, suspension of disbelief. The zombies are real. If I put myself in that situation, and I don't know how you feel about this, but there's never really a call to a rally point, right? So they're trying something new. They're going to do this. It's never like, you guys are doing this, that, or the other. And if we don't, if it doesn't work out, let's regroup here, right? Like this is our point where we're going to regroup. So that's sort of, I don't want to call it a gate review, but that check-in that you often see in management of, all right, you guys are going to go do this piece, and then we'll do that go, no go, that gate review. If you're doing like that Scrum thing, hey, we're going to do our sprint review. They don't often do that. And I don't know if that's because it's the apocalypse and it's like that saying of like, planning to fail, right? Or setting yourself up for failure because you're expecting that. But that's something that always stuck out to me. A lot of the situations throughout the show is they're going to go, in some cases, in different miles and miles away from each other. They never really set up that rendezvous point. And I don't know where you sit with that. Like, how do you view that kind of checkpoint if everything goes wrong?
It's interesting because I feel like in real world, there are kind of these natural checkpoints, your weekly touch base or whatever that you have with your leaders. And in this, I guess it didn't really stand out to me because, as we'll see kind of throughout the whole thing, it's that we all know we're going to this one thing. So even if we get separated, keep moving west, right? Like no matter what, just keep moving west. So it is unspoken. And I think in the real world, it needs to be much more spoken. Just like this is actually how we'll check in. Like what does success look like? What does support look like? And those things change with the different things. And kind of speaking to that too, what you said, like, we're suspending disbelief and this zombies are real. But also if we think about it, there's like, I don't want to be cheesy and be like, the real life zombies are, but at the same time, they're unexpected, right? We have all different types of zombies. There's all, like, we know that within the space of a day, our calendar is not going to be consistent like we want it to. There could be a recession. There could be a product that doesn't do as well. There could be a problem person within our organization. So there are all of these things that are both part of the environment, like the zombies are part of their environment, but that are also, expected and unexpected in how it's going to show up for us. And so I think that, as like navigating through that, it's just kind of an interesting perspective of, these are my, I'm gonna start saying that I'd be like, those are my zombies, but it's
your puppies and kittens, right?
That's right.
Yeah, no, I guess that's a good point. I guess, and maybe that says something to me as a leader. I view it, right, that the distance between that final point, that checkpoint piece of California, they're in I think right now they're in New Jersey, right? I think New York, right around there. So it's like, that is a really long goal to set with no markers of, outside of, I guess, that westerly progression. But there's no other markers in between New Jersey and California right now. And I guess that maybe to me is uneasy. Think about it from, if I was that leader, I'd want to be able to say, if things start to, because I'd want to keep that progress consistent, right? Keep the entire team moving in the same direction at the same pace. And maybe that is a little bit too controlling or micromanaging, especially given the situation of no real new normal now except for zombies. So that's an interesting point, though, that they still have an end state. So why do you need to check in the middle? I didn't think about it like that.
Well, and also if we think about it, kind of going back to what we said in the last episode of this grand vision that a leader has, sometimes you don't know what those checkpoints are going to be. So it's like, just keep moving in that direction. We don't know if there's towns or cities or other people, like we don't know what any of those things are. So if we, again, when you also have that kind of worldview, that values match, you're probably going to approach it in a similar type way to get to that end result. So it's likely that you'll fall apart and meet up again.
That's a really good point. Because then, as and again, talking about everyone getting involved, right? All the leaders, sort of helping out the team where there's weaknesses. I think while they're trying to get that fuel out their tent, there's like more zombies. Some people are getting a little hurt. They're getting held up. So you have Warren and Garnett are moving that truck, right? They're running out. They're trying to get the fuel line hooked up. You have that whole piece going on. So again, they are helping the team out to be successful, and know when they need to be leading the team and telling folks when to go this way or when to go that way. But then also, once those decisions are made, they can assess the decisions that they've made, find the weaknesses, and if they can fill those gaps, they fill those gaps. And I thought that was like really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have Doc and Murphy sitting in the back of that SUV playing Go Fish or whatever. So it's like you have some passive people, because again, Murphy's that mission, right? So that trust that they put in Doc to keep an eye on him, keep him safe. I think that's pretty interesting too. So and maybe that goes to the length of time that they've had that relationship with him. But like I said, we still have that weird variable of the random guy that told him where the fuel depot was, and so there's a lot of like uncertainty in that situation. So I think that trust is pretty interesting as well.
All right, so I do want to address Murphy. No leadership qualities so far. He's very in this against his will. Right. Yeah. So there's that. But there are two things that happen around Murphy where other people showed this really great leadership. So we are now in a place where Murphy is starting to feel more comfortable making his side remarks about everything. Right. Just very upset about his situation. Not a glass half full kind of gentleman. But when he does make those remarks, what I love about Warren is she does not engage with him. She's not like, she's not gonna volley with him. She's just like walking away like this guy, like I can't. But that's just it, where like leaders don't deal in petty stuff, they crush it. And so that's what she's doing. She's not like, this isn't an argument I'm gonna have with you. Like this, you're not in a place also to have a conversation about what this is. So you are along for the ride, however that occurred, right? Which we all know was an unfair situation for him. But at the same time, it's like, as the leader, I'm not going to engage with that kind of nonsense. Leaders shouldn't be dealing in drama.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. And you know, I would be lying if I said I wasn't who Murphy is right now at some points in my professional career, right? Especially first starting out, where I didn't always buy into the mission or didn't think that the decisions being made were the best ones, right? Because I thought I knew better. And I think, you know, what I think taking that attitude too is I think in some cases I had leaders that would have been very receptive to my ideas and I never kind of gave them that chance. And you know, but also to their discredit, I guess they never really created an environment where it felt like that feedback would be accepted either, right? So it's kind of like a little bit of both sides there with Murphy. But I'm sentimental towards him at this point too because I think him being the mission, I think that's very stressful, right? I could imagine being the savior of humanity, but then also what got him to the point of that was like you said, it was not of his own free will. It was very traumatic. Um and I don't think that anyone's ever stopped and sort of acknowledged that or given him the time to maybe cope with that. It's just been going at this point. So I think that that's also pretty interesting is how could you expect him to buy in when you've never given him like that space to grieve or cope or any sort of support mechanism?
Yes. And as leaders, well, it's like we're not necessarily people's therapists. It is on us to acknowledge when people are not going along with something for a reason. Like people don't wake up and think, I'm just going to ruin this plan because it's a Tuesday, right? Like no, most normal people don't do that. Most normal functioning people don't do that. So if someone is really fighting a change or really fighting something or really upset about something or really disengaged, like there is a reason. And as a leader, you're responsible to build that psychological safety so that, and these like brave spaces for people to be able to say what it is that's a problem. And you also have to have the guiding and mentoring skills and professional maturity that if people don't know how to present something well, that your defenses don't also go up, right? But to then coach them as to not to edit themselves or filter in any way, but it's like you wouldn't go up to someone and be like, oh, you're messed up, right? You did this wrong and you should feel badly about it. Obviously, that's not helpful. But instead, when we can really show people how to give feedback by giving them great feedback, but then inviting that on a consistent basis, we can really build those things that allow them to, you know, actually feel safe to do what they need to do to move through something and show up the way that they want to show up.
Yeah, that's a really great point too. Especially because as a leader, I think sometimes too, when you talk about support networks with like those that you're leading, um, you know, looking at myself, my spouse and I are in two drastically different um uh like lines of occupation, right? Like we have very little to no overlap. So you know, sometimes when it comes down to like even when you look at that support network that you have like personally versus professionally, um, it's very difficult for me to talk to like my spouse or even like my family about certain things at work to try to get their input or maybe their recommendation or just their understanding and empathy because the basis for the issues it takes like four times as long to try to explain why something would be an issue versus just hearing the issue overall, right? Because and then so when you try to um, remove the whys and you just go down to someone at work is being difficult or somebody at work isn't doing what I need them to do or I'm not doing what they want me to do because um, it sounds very petty, So sometimes that leader is the only person you can go to with those grievances, with those stressors, anything like that, because they're the only people that understand both the players and the um, technical or scientific, whatever it is, issues of it too. So, you said leader's not a therapist, but a lot of times, you kind of get thrust into that role a little bit because you're the only one maybe in that person's, um, circle of support that can respond and help and just even be that ear to listen. Maybe not always looking for a solution, but just somebody to understand.
And I think it's really important too that people build out, like good leaders build strong teams, that also it's like that team is also a support for all the other people on the team. And I know I personally feel that way about many of my teammates, that if something comes up, I can just say, can you jump on Zoom for 5 minutes? Could I call my boss? Absolutely. She would totally walk through something like that. But also it's just really nice that it's like, oh no, it's actually this whole support structure. And they do understand the content and the context of what I'm talking about. And maybe they've tried a different way that worked, or they've also tried ways that didn't work, and they can offer that insight as well.
Yeah, no, because I think it's easier to do those things as a group, especially even with like now in Z Nation, you have like 6 people going up against zombies. Even if those numbers are astronomical, you have 6 or more people that are fighting effectively as a team and working together. And again, this same episode, you have Citizen Z that what is it called? Dog sled, mushing sled, doesn't matter. I'm not very scientific. The dog sled that comes up onto the property with the frozen like zombie dog sled rider. I don't know the technical terms. So he mercies that zombie guy who's frozen solid. He finds that little dog. Then there ends up being those zombie dogs that are running around, his sort of compound thing. He's trying to deal with them. It's just him single threaded. He's also still thinking about the mission and everyone and wants to do the update and the check-in. So I think again, you talk about that remote worker piece now, that really is sort of changed my way of looking at him as he exists up there. And so again, checking in with those other teammates because they're going through the exact same thing potentially. However, they're going through it seemingly alone in a way. So it's like that support structure piece is crazy. Yeah. You blew my mind with the remote worker piece. I cannot believe I didn't. Like I said, right? You view the whole thing through a bunch of different lenses all the time. And so that's crazy. I didn't think about that.
And another piece around this time that happened with Murphy, someone else showing great leadership around him, was Doc. So you said they were playing in the cards in the car, and then the zombies start to come over, and Murphy has a very traumatic response to those zombies for good reason. And so Doc tries to talk him out of it. And then when he realizes that talking him out of it isn't going to work, he gets out of the car and goes to draw them away.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that was an aspect of leadership, but also just an aspect of being a really great team member is, oh, this is bothering you. I can shoulder that burden for a little bit. Let me just do that. Or let me draw away. Or I have a strength in this, right? He is not afraid of, he's not afraid to fight zombies. So for him, it was less of a thing than it was for Murphy. But I thought Doc showed really great teammate qualities and also a really good leadership quality there.
Do you think that do you think there was any forethought or not? Was that just everybody knows Doc is a good guy, but do you think Warren or Garnett, when they were deciding who was going to go where, do you think that identifying that capability? Because I don't know if say Mac or Addie, to this point, from their personalities, I don't feel like they would have done that same thing. You know what I mean? Addie's far more, I don't want to say crass, but at this point, her character is sort of far more it's her and Mac, they're a unit. That's that they care about each other more than kind of anyone else. To a point. So do you think that he played a role in that?
I would love to think that they were that thoughtful about it because everybody is so rough with Murphy. It's something that just on a personal level, And knowing that he didn't ask for this, he didn't ask to be the savior of humanity, and now he is. It came about a very traumatic way. He's being forced on this mission that he doesn't want to be on and never asked to be a part of. And so I feel like everybody's very physically rough with him, and then they're also very verbally rough with him. So I would love to, except for Doc. Doc is the only one who treats him like he's a person. He doesn't put his hands on him, right? So it's like this type of, so I would love to think that, like, yes, that maybe that could be the alignment of something, like if it was, right, obviously we will never know. But at the same time, if it was, like, genius, because again, that's a strength that he has, right? He was, like, a drug counselor. He can talk to people. And so what a great person to have around, someone who has these different traumas and who also isn't, doesn't need to necessarily be out there fighting zombies all the time. He'll do it, but it's not like, everybody else is pretty gung-ho about, yeah, we're doing this. So yeah, I would like to think that it was intentional.
Yeah, I always forget about the, pre-Z Doc being the drug counselor and, potential drug connoisseur still too. But
Pharmacist, he says, right?
yes, pharmacist. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess, but that's also, like, as a leader, being able to identify the skills that maybe somebody comes in with that weren't exactly what were in the job description, but can still contribute to the team in an effective way, and using those strengths that people have. I guess that's something I guess you can always try to keep an eye out for as well too.
Mm-hmm. So another piece in this episode that I thought was really interesting was they are storming, right? So they pick up the new person who tells them where the fuel is. That person just seems not a good fit, I would say, for the rest of the team. And then we have Cassandra, who's like, we shouldn't bring that person along. But I think that the best example of storming in this episode was when Addie and Mac are going up the refinery. And as they're climbing to the top, they're arguing about Murphy and taking him to California. Because Addie is like, yeah, we should. Warren and Garnett believe in this. We should believe in this too. And Mac is like, why should we believe this? And I think that it's just such an interesting thing where it's like neither one of them is fighting against it per se, but it is that storming of, do we need to push back on this leadership? Do we need to push back on this decision? And, like, figuring out kind of how everyone feels and how they feel about what it is that you're doing as a group.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the bringing those I don't know what the word is, not biases, right? But with Mac being sort of against the goals and the mission, and him being off, and having, that sort of relationship with Addie, he could change, potentially change that mind, right? Which is for Warren and Garnett, right? That runs counter to what their goals and their missions are. So that could really erode the team. So I guess, in real life, right? If I was working with that team, right? Like, is that something that then do I split those two up, or do I focus in on trying to get Mac to buy into the mission? Like, you know what I mean? So I guess I didn't really think about that. I always looked at Murphy as being the potential to erode the team because he has the least to gain from its success. But I guess even internally, those team dynamics could have drastic effects on the outcome of what the goal is.
I don't see Murphy as someone who could erode the team, because he is with the team, but he is definitely not part of the team.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Yeah.
So there's that. But I think that, like with Addie and Mac, I think it's always important to keep two people who work well together. I hear a lot of people, they're like, oh, maybe we should split this up. And no, because the one who, if they truly trust each other, one will be able to convince the other. And in this case, of course, Addie is able to convince Mac, Mac could have convinced Addie too. That's fine. But at the same time, splitting them up, I think, would have done more harm to the group in general because of the trust that those two have with each other. So don't hurt the whole group just because you're worried about, like, these two over here, but instead again, trust that that worldview and those values are in alignment. Because I think also when I see leaders who feel the need to like reshuffle teams and stuff all the time, it's almost like their way of staying in control and cutting off the trust and access people believe they have with each other. So if all of a sudden somebody was like, oh, this person you've been collaborating with, you're not collaborating with them anymore, you're just collaborating with this other person. Okay. But like, that's not how human relationships work, right? And that's not how that different trust is built. If there's a true problem, that's different. But yeah, people should be able to disagree and they should have someone they could talk to about that.
That's a good point, because the thing too is like, so we know now, and it was alluded to in the episode as well, where Cassandra had a previous relationship with the guy that they picked up that's bringing them the fuel. And at this point in the episode, you don't know what that relationship is. You can make the assumption that it's not a positive relationship, and then given the remembering they found her locked in a cage and everything like that, it's one of those things where it's like, was she an outlaw or a bandit or something? Is she trying to be good? And this guy is, remembers who she was, and she'll lose that trust with the group and lose that safety. Or, is she like from a rival gang, like of bad people, bad people or whatever? So it's like, it's interesting because she's obviously focused on getting the fuel that benefits them all, right? They know that. So does the rando guy, right? If you get rid of the zombies, then everybody can, take from that, have that fuel. But like you can also tell throughout that she's like, that's in the back of her mind, and she's trying to eliminate this perceived threat that's within the team. And that's something that, Warren, everyone else are, I think, kind of, it seems like Warren and maybe Garnett kind of have like the, I'll use it. I think you hate the term, but like the worldly knowledge to know that like that there's might be something going on there, right? That little bit of gut instinct, but it's definitely not confirmed. So I thought that was interesting too, especially since they end up sort of together, broken off onto that little side tangent running around up there. So.
And I think there's another important aspect of storming there, where it's like Cassandra hasn't been part of the team enough for them to trust if she says they shouldn't take somebody. Whereas if Doc or Addie or Mac had said that, that's a really different conversation. So again, we're still in that storming phase of, can we trust each other? And let me push the boundaries of what that trust looks like until we actually earn it and gain it.
Yeah. And then when she ends up, I think she pushes him off down to the zombies or something. And then, they're like, where is he? And she's like, oh, he didn't make it. You know what I mean? It was that way she said it, the way it was like any trust that might have been starting to be built there was kind of like gone again instantly. Right. So it's just like, cause they're like, oh yeah, he didn't make it. Okay. So, but again, the situation didn't allow them to unpack that or really, kind of question her too much because, zombies and everything else. But yeah, so that was a really interesting sort of piece. And then when you had, towards the end of the episode, those folks come in and they're like, oh, and they find that little music box that she was using to, which now going back, I'm all over the place. Stay with me. When she had that music box and she kind of used that to sort of control or not control, but like get the zombies' attention and everything. But it was that kind of isolating. That was a cool skill or trick, right, for the environment that they were in. And I feel like she gained some trust and belief from the team that then was lost with that whole he didn't make it. So if you just want to forget everything I said and say it backwards so that is a nice cohesive thought, that'd be great.
Interesting, because I actually did not view it that same way. I viewed it as her I viewed it as her gaining skills or showing skills that she had that could contribute to the team. I didn't believe that trust was lost when she said he didn't make it, because it was just very matter of fact and moved on. And they were probably curious about it, but I didn't see it as like an elimination of any trust that had been built. It was kind of this acceptance of what is type of thing. So but again, perception wise, that's just not how I perceive that. Especially like moving forward, because moving forward, there's a significant amount of trust that some people put in Cassandra, right? But
that's it. You know what? And that's a very valid point too. Yeah. No, I
Thanks.
like
Maybe
that. I
for
guess
some,
he's,
yeah.
yeah, interesting. Yeah. So, but all in all, I mean, I thought this episode was really good, and like you said, a great like forming of the team. It was great. You know, more leadership coming out, and I think to this point so far too, Warren has really just let Garnett sort of run the show, right? She's been really great at being like that effective follower, and she is bought into what he's done, and she's helped him like stay on track, right? So I think that that's really cool too. Like that was something that's very noticeable about the episode, and like as we start to establish our relationship and understanding the characters, I think that that's like very clear. Is Garnett's kind of running the shows, making the big decisions. But Warren and him have those similar same intentions together. You know what I mean? And I don't think anybody can question that they're not on the same page.
Agreed. Agreed. So much good leadership stuff in this episode.
Yeah, no, for sure.